Welcome once again to a discussion we started regarding the Bhagavad Gita. So, three things as I told in the previous episodes, those are the very important. Number one is the divine teacher, number two, the human disciple, and third one is Kurukshetra. So, the divine teacher, we have discussed this at some length because the teacher here is the divine himself, the God himself, or maybe the God incarnate Sri Krishna. And the disciple here is a human, a man, Arjuna. So this is a rare combination. As we can say, Nara Narayan. Nara Narayan. Nara means human being, man, and Narayan is the God incarnate or the God himself. So this combination is also symbolic in nature. Of course, in our scriptures there are other example instances of both the heavenly beings and the earthly beings. They are together. In our Upanishads, another example is Indra and Kucha. And another example in Svetasvatara Upanishad, where two birds are said to be seated, perched in a tree. Someone is on the branch above and someone on the branch lower. Dvasuparna, Shavajo Shakhaya. So both the birds are looking at each other. And one of them is a heavenly being and the other is an earthly being. So this combination is already there in scriptures and they are symbolic in nature. And we can see that most of the things are symbolic. We have also discussed in this forum many times before that things are really symbolic in nature. Whatever is there in our Shastras, Puranas, Upanishads, the Vedas, mostly they are symbolic in nature. They represent something. As in case of Svetasvatara Upanishad, two birds, the lower bird is an earthly being, the upper bird is a heavenly being. And both of them, they conspire, they converse, they interact with each other. And this indicates that the heavenly being tries to pull or try to lift this earthly being to a higher state. And this earthly being also aspires to come to closer to the heavenly being. So these things are symbolic in nature. And here also the same thing. The teacher is the divine and this disciple is a human. And when the teacher is the divine, we have already discussed that also. Every one of us carries the divine within himself or herself. Yes, we have the divine. The soul we call is a divine spark of the divine. So we are carrying God. We are the vehicle of God. God is within us. So, in a way, this Nara Narayan, this symbolic in the Mahabharata or in the Bhagavad Gita, that happens also here on the earth. Everybody of us has a Narayan within and a Nara in his or her outward nature. So this is put in the Bhagavad Gita in a different context, that Sri Krishna is there and he advises Arjuna on some of his problems, on some of his crises, where the anguish and the grief overtake Arjuna. So that's one. And the second thing is, Arjuna, as a disciple, remains obliged to his teacher throughout. We have heard that when he was getting his formal education under Dronacharya, he was a very good student. In the recently telecast Mahabharata, we have also come across this fact that Drona was all praise for Arjuna. So he was an obedient student, a very good disciple. So when we talk of disciple, it is disciple is and the word discipline. They are two, both of the words, they are interlinked. A disciple must be disciplined. Unless discipline is there or somebody is disciplined enough, he cannot be termed as a disciple. So Arjuna remains a true and sincere disciple throughout, as was in the case of Dronacharya. Here also in the Bhagavad Gita, he remains true as a disciple. And throughout Gita we have seen he has never violated or he has never defied the teacher. Whatever he has told him to do, he has done. But again, yes, he had some curiosities which he wanted to satisfy, and therefore he put some counter questions. But it is not skepticism. Skepticism is something else that is different from your curiosity. Curiosity is a thirst for knowledge. You want to know. You want to know. It is what we call in Sanskrit jigyasa. But skepticism, it is all about doubt. Skepticals, they doubt everything. They don't believe in everything. They go on asking questions on everything and anything. But the curious ones, they never do that. If they ask questions, it is out of curiosity. If they ask questions, they want to quench their thirst for knowledge. But skeptics, they question everything. They doubt everything. So Arjuna was not a skeptic. He was a curious student throughout the Bhagavad Gita in all the 18 chapters, and slowly the God has tried to convince him to do his duties and other things that we have already discussed. And the other thing is, apart from being a true and sincere disciple, there was some other thing in him that was really playing, spoil sport. For example, his ego. Yes, as a disciple he was true, sincere. It is all very well. But definitely there was some ego. Because just before the beginning of the Mahabharata war, he was very confident that he would have to play a very important role. And that was his ego. And then when the grief, sadness and other things came or took over him, it is also due to ego. Yes. When you are too much concerned with yourselves, or for that matter, when we are too much worried about ourselves, me, I, my, all these things, when they, take us in their grip, then all other things crop up. The worry comes in, confusion creeps in, dilemma also comes in. So many problems can happen. And here is the same case has occurred in case of Arjuna. So the Bhagavad Gita has tried its best, or Krishna has tried to lift or to bring the man out of the clutches of ego. classes of ego, and as per our Sankhya Darsana, there's three gunas: Sattva, Raja, and Tama. Arjuna was subject to all these three gunas. All these three gunas he was subject to, and he has to be delivered. He has to be get deliverance of all these things from the clutches of this. Though practically a very good student, he had these problems, and he must have to go beyond this. That's what the Bhagavad Gita tried to do here. Because these three things, Arjuna has no other way. Two things, ways were there before him. Either he had to participate in the fight and follow the war to its logical end, or he would completely recoil or escape from the Bhagavad Gita, from the Mahabharata war. So he has not recoiled. He was not an escapist. He didn't try to escape. But escapism is something else. Suppose we are frightened, and that's why we recoil, we go back, we want to escape. That is something else. But Arjuna was not afraid of the war. His anguish, his dejection, his confusion, his dilemma, his indecision, all these things are not out of fear. He was not scared. It is just because he didn't want to slay his relations, gurus, uncles, grandfathers, all these things. So it was not out of fear he wanted to recoil. So it was not a case of escapism. Escapists are something else. We know them. And sometimes they talk tall, but whenever the situation arises, immediately they go back with their words. And that is a dangerous thing. But Arjuna was not an escapist. So if we can analyze this human disciple, so many qualities he had, apart from this egoistic attitude, all other things, a lot of good, virtues he had. He's a knower of Shastra. He knew everything, the ethical, the moral, and other things also. Second one, he was a warrior and also knew his duty. A true and sincere student that nobody can deny. Then he is not an escapist. Never questioned out of skepticism to the God incarnate. He was, very docile, just curious enough to ask questions. So all these good qualities are there with him. So perhaps the best disciple ever. Otherwise the God couldn't have chosen him to spell out this, this knowledge, the doctrine, the gospel to a human being. So the entire Bhagavad Gita is all about leading a spiritual life. A spiritual life, yes, ethical life, moral life, societal life, individual life, familial life, so many lives we are living at the same time. Because as an individual, I may be a professional, I am a family man, I live in a society, I have some moral duties to perform, some ethics to follow, and I have to play many roles simultaneously at the same time. I am a son, I am a father, I am a student, I am a husband, I am a brother, I am a man in the society. So many roles we play every day. But the other role that is very important, or that is the most important one, have we ever bothered to play that? And that role is of a spiritual man. Spiritual man doesn't mean going temples, attending churches, or maybe praying in the mosque every day. That doesn't guarantee any spirituality whatsoever. Spiritual man or spiritual life is something else, and that is to live with God. To live with God. And when that will take place, or when that occurs, everything else becomes unimportant. Everything else becomes unimportant. If we can do that, that is the best thing we can achieve in this life. And that exactly what the God or Sri Krishna wants to inculcate in Arjuna. Arjuna, as we have already discussed, is representative of all of us, entire humanity. So these things we must remember, that the Bhagavad Gita doesn't discriminate, doesn't segregate. But the Bhagavad Gita looks at the entire life or entire humanity as a whole. This life is different, that life is different, nothing like that. If somebody leads a spiritual life, he is a better social man, he becomes a better family man, he becomes a better, professional, better father, better brother, better son, everything else. Let us try to think it over. If somebody is truly spiritual, other things will automatically fall into places. So we'll be discussing the rest in the next episode.